The Sports Town Podcast.
All right, I'm pleased to be joined by Vineet of the Ball is Bae podcast. How's it going, Vineet?
Very good, man. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful. Had a big night last night. Of course, at the time of the recording, it's on Monday morning. Of course, what would happen in Game 3 between the Suns and Bucks, we're going to talk about. But before we get to talk about that, if you want to talk more about your podcast, how long you've been doing it. I know we kind of mentioned it a little bit before we started recording. But if you want to mention your podcast, where we can find it and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Yeah. So I am a co-host of a podcast called the Ball is Bae Podcast. We kind of brand ourselves as the largest podcast in an Indian accent because both the hosts are from India, and we talk about the NBA. And we've been doing this for about 4 years, and we've been very lucky to have had access to a lot of NBA players that have come on our podcast. So we have had guys like Rashad Lewis, Bruce Bowen. We have had what's his name, the Run TMC guy. Robert Ory also. So we have had some NBA players come in. I had the opportunity to go to the All-Star game in 2019, which was great. And we primarily focus on NBA news reviews, kind of very similar to what you do. We do some interviews too. And we've been experimenting with some social kind of content on Instagram and Twitter this year. And it's been pretty good. So if you want to kind of check us out, I think we're at Ball is Bae Pod on Instagram, and on Twitter, it's the same thing. And if you want to, go to Apple or Google Podcast or Spotify, just search for Ball is Bae. You should find us.
All right, thanks. That sounds awesome. That's really cool that you get to interview those type of players. I'm actually a Spurs fan, so when you just said
whoa, let's go.
Yeah, right?
Let's go.
It's kind of a tough season the last 2 years, but I feel like I think next year is going to be better. We'll see what happens in the offseason. Speaking of the Spurs, and again, before we talk about the NBA Finals, you just said you were pretty excited about the Spurs. So what do you think they need to do in this year's offseason to get back to where they were a few years ago?
I mean, I think it would be pretty amazing if we got to where we were before. I think, I've been a Spurs fan since, I think, like 2002. And so, I don't think there's going to be a run as great as that. Those 20 years was just incredible. So we've been spoiled as Spurs fans, just to have that kind of excellence year in and year out. So I don't think we're going to get there anytime soon. But the key is to tank and get a Tim Duncan. That's the strategy that has worked before. I don't know if it's going to work again, but I think getting rid of DeMar and getting rid of some of the older pieces, Patty Mills. Even though I would hate for Patty Mills to leave, but I think it's time for him to go and find something else outside because the Spurs are going nowhere, and he could probably get a better opportunity to have deep playoff runs because he's a very good role player. Kind of clear out cap space and try to get a big agent. I mean, that's probably their best bet. But nobody really wants to go play in San Antonio, which is kind of not the best thing for us. Tank and get a number one pick, and then build from there. That's the strategy for small market teams.
I've heard in rumors that DeJounte Murray and Derek White could be trade pieces for a certain player. I'm not sure. I would like to keep DeJounte Murray, and I think Derek White hasn't quite reached his potential yet. But what do you think about those type? Do you think they'll be traded, and who do you think they would make a trade for if they decided to part ways with their future guards of the future?
I think that the NBA has become more of a player-driven league. We were very lucky that Tim tried to move just one time to Orlando, but and I don't necessarily think that, even though we would love to have Murray and White on our rosters forever, I think White probably seems like a person that would be a little bit more loyal if the franchise does the right thing beside him. But I think that for the most part, players want to go win championships. They want to be in a winning situation. And I would be happy to let them go if they want to go to a better situation. I don't know who you're going to get I just feel like at this point, we have to do a hard reset. Since Kawhi kind of left us, we have been trying a lot of things. We have been competitive for our roster, but it's not been, first round exits are not much fun. And so they just need to hit a hard reset, let Pop go. As much as I would hate that, but he's done his job. He looks old. He's coaching the U.S. team right now. He's had personal problems himself, so getting him to do this again and again may be too much for him. So just kind of a hard reset. Just hit that button, and start over.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I think DeMar DeRozan, who is currently our best player, I think he's not quite as much as I like DeMar DeRozan. I think he's
he's very
player.
Good. Very good.
But I don't know if he's a player that can lead you to back to what we were. I'm just not like, I just don't think he can get us back to where we were or even close to what we had. So I do think letting DeRozan go would be the smart idea. Again, I'm not a fan of tanking, but at the same time, I think if we want to get another Tim Duncan type of player, we probably will have to go that direction. Let's go to the NBA Finals now. Of course, the Bucks won Game 3. But do you still think the Suns have control of this series?
Well, technically, yes. So I generally feel that the Bucks have a better team. I think they are much more deep. They have everything that's going on for them is pretty solid. If the Bucks play a good game and the Suns play a good game, the Bucks win. So that's kind of how I look at every series. Is like, if a team plays their best and the other team plays their best, who wins? And generally that team kind of wins the series. So unless the Bucks don't show up like they did in Game 2, where Drew and Chris were absolutely terrible, I think the Bucks still have the better team. They can execute. If they execute what they executed like they executed last game, I think they should be okay.
Yeah, I originally had the Bucks winning this series in 6 games, and I think Giannis has been super impressive, but his supporting cast really hasn't been there until last night. But do you think, or how impressed with Giannis have you been after getting injured in the Hawks series, not playing for the last 2 games? People said there was a chance he could be out for a long time. But how impressed have you been with Giannis Antetokounmpo?
Absolutely a beast. I mean, he's just beasting on everybody. I think. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I sense a little Timmy in him, because he's kind of like, he does so much on the floor, both on the defensive side as a leader. He lets people operate and have their space and their moments, which are very important in a team game. I'm super impressed by him, not just because he's putting gaudy numbers, but the way he's conducting himself as the leader of the team, where he is making sure that he's not imposing himself over Chris and Drew and giving them the space to operate, which is very important, because if they reach a place where everyone's just kind of like looking up to Giannis to win them games, then they're not going to win the series against Suns, who are just so good at executing whatever they do. Like, that's the key with the Suns, is that they are extremely good at executing pick and roll and pick and pop, like just these like really key basketball fundamental plays. They're able to execute at a very high level. And with Giannis, I think he's figured that out, is that he can't win all these games by himself. He needs Drew and Chris to come up to a level where the whole team is winning this game. And so he has in a very smart way, he's getting them to kind of give them the space to operate. So I think that's the thing that I'm very impressed about, because I mean, Giannis can always drop 40 on you. Like, I don't think that's ever been a question, like, oh, can Giannis score 40 on your team? He can. Can Giannis take 20 rebounds? Yes, he can. Like, those things are easy to do for a person of Giannis's caliber, but I think the more impressive part from me is how he's getting his team involved.
I've heard this question a lot, but why do you think we're so hard on Giannis Antetokounmpo? Because to be honest with you, I know the reason why we're hard on Ben Simmons is because he's a guard and because he should be able to shoot a lot better than what he can. Or, we know he can't shoot, but he should be able to shoot a lot better if he's going to be a guard. But seems like we're very critical of Giannis, how he can't shoot the three, or he's not a good free throw shooter, but he's such a good player all around. But why do you think we're just so hard on the two-time league MVP?
I'm not hard on Giannis, but I understand your question, which is why generally people are hard on Giannis. I think the one thing I've learned after following basketball after such a long time is that people are the majority of the loud crowd is what I call them, which is the people who are more vocal, who have an opinion about everything. They are more oriented towards style of play than impact of play. So they are more into how the player looks playing than what the person is playing as, right? So, and this is a debate I always have with everybody between Kobe and Tim, is that the difference between both of them, obviously Tim being the much better overall player, but it's just, you don't see it if you're just casually watching a game, right? You don't see what he does on the defensive side. And so you're just focused on, he doesn't have the flair or the oomph factor. And hence, people don't necessarily, so if Timmy has a bad offensive game or Giannis has a bad offensive game, that means he doesn't do well on the other side. So I feel like that's one narrative of it, which is he is not very beautiful to look at. He doesn't have the moves. He doesn't fit into, like, people love Kyrie Irving. I don't get it. I just don't get it. I mean, yes, he looks good playing basketball, which is beautiful, but I think his impact on the team is mostly negative because he doesn't defend, doesn't do anything other than score the basketball. That's one part of it. The other part of it, I think, is that Giannis does not necessarily powwow with everybody. Like, he's not, he lives in his own world. Like, he's busy having fun with his brothers and his wife and having smoothies, and he's doing his thing. He's not, doing what LeBron does or Chris Paul. Like, he's not chummies with everybody. So no one really has that kind of attachment to him as much, because he's also not American. So he doesn't really have that camaraderie, I think. And which is why, people in the media don't necessarily kind of have that, love for him as they would have for the other players. Was that your question, or do you think that it was mostly to do with impact on game?
You pretty much answered my question. I just had heard so much about Giannis. We always critical, he can't shoot a three-pointer, he can't shoot a free throw, or like I said, he's not very flashy when he plays, but he gets the job done. I mean, he has a decent amount of triple doubles. Like, he's a two-time league MVP. I think he's somewhat fun to watch just because he dominates when he's on. But yeah, you answered my question, what I was looking for. So speaking of the Bucks, do you think there's a good chance they win the next 3 games? Because I originally had the Bucks in 6, but do you think the Bucks have a good chance of winning the next 3 games?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if the Bucks just play average basketball that they're capable of, where everybody chips in, I think they are a problem for the Suns, because the Suns have to be at 90% to defeat the Bucks, and the Bucks have to be at like 80% to defeat the Suns. So if everybody shows up even to an average level, I think the Suns definitely are probably going to lose the series. But it all depends on Chris and Drew. I don't think that's it kind of sucks, because I wish they had that help. I wish Giannis had that help of a consistent 2 who came in and delivered every time, especially in big moments, which he doesn't have. I think, I don't know if they'll get the next 3 games, but I definitely think that they should win the series.
Yeah, and speaking of the Suns, do you think Monte Williams made the right choice of resting Devin Booker at the end? I think there was still somewhat of a competitive game, and then he started resting Devin Booker. Do you think that was a smart move?
I mean, they had lost the game, I think, for the most part, and well, not really, but I just felt, I don't think it's necessarily a smart move, but I'm totally fine with it. I think sometimes coaches want to see how different lineups work, and if they feel like, okay, this is not the game we're going to win, let's just get our star player out and let's try a different lineup and see if there is an impact with this lineup. I mean, a lot of coaches do that when they feel that the game is lost.
Yeah, and I think it was I don't know if it was a smart move, but at the same time, I understand what they were doing because, I mean, the game was somewhat still close, but I think the Bucks had ultimately won the game. They had controlled the game for most of the series, except for a little part in the second quarter there. But this, if we continue talking about the Suns, DeAndre Ayton in his first postseason has been very impressive.
Very impressive.
How impressed with the 22-year-old have you been?
Very impressive. I mean, he's done a great job. I mean, you know, I think a lot of that credit goes to Chris Paul because I mean, I don't know if you remember Lob City, but DeAndre Jordan looked like amazing when he was playing next to Chris Paul. Like he just looked like a different player. And once you took Chris Paul out, you know, DeAndre Jordan kind of fell off the face of earth, right? You know, there was this huge, like he was like a big free agent signing at some point of time. Like he was that impressive. So as much as I'm impressed with DeAndre Ayton, I think that, like, I would say a huge part of the credit goes to Chris Paul and how Chris Paul uses him in the pick and roll and how he finds him. And I think there is a kind of trust factor where DeAndre knows that eventually he's going to get a couple of touches, which is all he needs. You know, he doesn't want to be frustrated and keep demanding the ball because as big men, you know, you need somebody to feed them the ball. And if no one's feeding them the ball, then, you know, they're going to get frustrated. And he's a number one pick, so, you know.
Yeah, I think DeAndre Ayton the last few years had been kind of judged unfairly because, as I've been mentioned the last few weeks, we always thought he would be, because, of course, in his draft class, you had Luka Doncic, you had Trae Young. I think we always kind of judge him unfairly just because he's not those players. But I think this postseason, he's finally showed to people that he was worth the number one overall pick. And of course, to be fair to the Suns, at the time, DeAndre Ayton was the best overall prospect. But I understand, like, you know, Ayton has finally, I think, proved to people he can be, or he was a good number one pick. And I think in the future, he could be a top 5 or a top 3 in elite center. But speaking of Chris Paul, do you think if the Suns do win the finals, do you think he'll be named the MVP?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I don't see anyone else. I mean, who else would you think? I mean, Booker's not played well. I think maybe last game he played okay. Maybe DeAndre Ayton if in the next, like if he's so crucial in the win, but I think CP3 is probably going to win it. I don't see anyone else.
Yeah, I think it's just either him or Booker. I mean, yeah, Booker hasn't been super impressive, but I would not be surprised if he got the MVP. But I think if the Bucks on the other side end up winning, I think it's going to be Giannis. We all know that. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I do kind of want to talk more about this. Do you think right now Chris Paul is a top 5 point guard in the league?
In the league? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right, let's see. Got Steph, point guard, right? Yeah. Got Steph, Dame. Who else you got? Yeah, Steph, Dame, Chris, CP3.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many good point guards in the league. Of course, there's Damian Lillard, Steph Curry. You can kind of, I mean, Luka is more considered a point guard than a shooting guard. And then you guys got like Kyrie Irving.
Isn't Luka like a point forward? You know, just because of his size, or you still consider him point guard? I mean, yeah, I think he was in the guard section for the All-Star, right?
Yeah, I would consider him more of a point guard because he handles the ball a lot.
Right.
The majority of the time. And I think when he came into the league, I think he was considered a shooting guard, but he is 6'6", so he's got that size of a shooting guard. But again, he's got the handles and he handles the ball a lot, and I would consider him more of a point guard. But and of course, as we go back to Game 3, the Suns did not ultimately play well. The Bucks were very impressive. What do you think was the big reason why the Suns couldn't take Game 3, and why do you think the Bucks dominated so much in the last game?
Why? You know, I really, we do this live every day on Instagram right after the game. I don't know what time it is, Eastern Standard Time, but it is 10:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time. So I don't know what time it's in the US, but and I was trying really hard to come up with a reason as to what really happened in the game, but I didn't really see anything other than, you know, the Bucks played pretty much the same kind of game that they played last time, except for maybe Jrue Holiday shot better. What happened in Game 2 was that Suns got really lucky, and they got some really difficult shots up at the right moment. They were getting some very tough shots in, and that did not happen this time. So I don't necessarily think there was anything that was different from the last game, other than the fact that the Suns were able to put down shots that were difficult, and they couldn't do it this time.
Yeah, I would agree with you as well. And again, I think, like I said, the Bucks are the better team overall, but I think the Suns, I mean, game 1, they dominated. Game 2 is a little different. Of course, in game 3, the Bucks finally came up to play. I think the Bucks were a little desperate too, of course. They were a lot more aggressive. But before we end the interview, who do you like ultimately at the end of the season? I think you said you mentioned a little bit the Bucks, but who do you think will end up pulling out in the finals this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bucks are going to pull it off. I think that they have the best player in the series. They have the best team in the series. It's just a matter of them kind of just executing at an average level. And, if you had to roll the dice, you would roll your dice on that. But on the other hand, I would be very happy for CP3 if he wins. So this is one of those finals where I'm happy if either team wins.
And again, thanks for coming on. It's been a great talk, especially about the finals. But before we end the interview, do you have anything else you want to talk more about your podcast, what you have in store, all that good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if people want to follow us, they can go find us on Bae Podcast. And really, thanks for inviting me on the podcast. I think that it's great to talk to a Spurs fan. I mean, I didn't. How did you become a Spurs fan? Let's talk Spurs for 5 minutes before we go. What was your Spurs? What's your Spurs induction story?
So the reason why I became a Spurs fan is because the first ever NBA game I watched, if I can remember right, it was the Spurs. I don't know if they were taking on the Cavs or someone else, but it was the first time I ever watched an NBA game. And I think it was Tim Duncan was the first guy I ever really saw, and just became a Spurs fan. And I think it was in the finals in 2007. But again, my family wasn't a huge NBA family, but that's when I kind of became a fan. And of course, after Tim Duncan started getting a little older, I became a huge Kawhi Leonard fan. And I understand, the way things ended were not great, but I'm still loyal to Kawhi. But just first time I ever watched, they were the first team I ever really watched, and I just kind of fell in love with the Spurs. And yeah, that's pretty much my story. It's not a bad story.
That's a good. I mean, I'm always interested in learning, because I'm from India and we don't necessarily have a team to support. We just have to pick a team in the US. We're not regionally focused. So it's always interesting for me to know how people find teams to support. And obviously, literally 1 out of every 3 NBA fan is a Lakers fan. So I'm always surprised and happy to find people who are not a Lakers fan and who are not from that place of origin. So I was just curious about that story. And also the other question we ask all our guests, and you're not a guest on the podcast, but we would love to have you, is who do you think had a better career, Tim Duncan or Kobe Bryant?
Oh, Tim Duncan. I mean, I understand I might be a little biased towards that, but
But if you had to even take away your bias, let's say you take away your bias and say, okay, if I had to be purely analytical, how would you keep both the careers? Where do you think one is better and one is, how would you weigh it?
Well, I mean, if you look at both careers, Tim Duncan and Kobe, and both were legends. Both I think Duncan's top 5, Kobe's somewhere in the top 10 there. But if you look, Kobe went to more finals, but they both won 5. Tim Duncan has 2 league MVPs. Kobe only has 1. I think, if I can remember, Duncan went to 14 All-Star games. I think Kobe went to more, but I think that was because of fans, because the fans were more like Kobe just because he was flashy. But if you look at I think Duncan has more All-NBA first-team selections, and Duncan did go to more playoffs. I don't think Duncan ever missed the playoffs.
No, never missed the playoffs, yeah.
The last few years, Kobe didn't. I think Kobe, toward the end of his career, he was, Kobe was more, I think, selfish a little more toward in his career than Duncan was. And Duncan even took many pay cuts, and Kobe did not. And then, of course, at the end, Kobe became less selfish and was more team driven. But if you look at the way their careers played, Duncan, never missed a playoff series, always in my opinion, took pay cuts to make the team better. Kobe never did that. So, and again, more league MVPs, more finals MVPs for Duncan. I just think Duncan at the end just had more awards and better stats. And again, he was more consistent than Kobe was. So
there you go. All right, man. On that good note, on that homage to the great man.
Right.
Did you know that there's actually an Instagram account for Tim Duncan?
I did not know. Like, it's his own personal account.
It's a very interesting account. I'll tell you what it is. It's an account of Tim Duncan and his friend, and they are like it's called Squatch and Cox. It's really I mean, I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of like, oh, you can't because I had this thing on. But it's basically Tim and his friend, and they like go fishing, and it's just Squatch and Cox. I think like Squatch is probably Tim, and Cox is the other guy, and they're like, going hunting, playing paintball. It's so weird to see that Instagram account of Timmy, but it's the only Instagram account where he has some public photos of him as a human being.
Yeah, I've actually never heard that, but I should definitely go give that a follow for both my podcast account and my personal account. So, again, thanks for coming on, Vineet.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was been great. It's great, especially that you're a Spurs fan. I'm a Spurs fan, so that's a great talk. So
that's a good one, man. That's a good one. Yeah.
All right, thanks for coming on, Vineet, and have a wonderful day.
All right, dude. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Town Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and much more. Also, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Sports Town Podcast. If you want to check out more videos of the Sports Town Podcast, click on the right.